transformation is a fundamental and irreversible change in the way an organisation works. And I think that includes both changing the organisation inside out and outside in. What I mean by that is inside out means changing the way that the people think and behave, right? So that they can then decide on how they can effectively change their processes and how they can effectively adopt technology. Outside in means how you change the organisation so you can improve the interaction with your customers, with your suppliers that form part of your wider ecosystem.
Change has three elements or three categories. So if you take continuous improvement, we've said on a number of occasions that if your operating model supports your strategic ambition, but you need it to be more efficient, then continuous improvement is the type of change that you need to engage in. And you can do that independently of other sort of functions and other sort of parts of the organization. But then if you look at change as a practice, then if your strategic ambition is supported still by your operating model and your environment, but you need it to be more effective, then to us that's change. And sometimes change has some transformative elements. You might transform the technical platform, for example, but it's changing changing within the current operating model. But if your operating model will not support your ambition or constrains your ability to deliver that ambition, you have to transform that operating model and environment to enable that to happen. And to us, that's quite important because it sets expectations. So if you're embarking on continuous improvement and calling it transformation, then the expectation is the world's going to change. Well, no, it's not. A few of the cogs might. So when you get to a transformation, leading through that is going to be very different to leading through an operation that has some change in it. So I think it's important that our clients understand that we are talking about one of those. We're not putting all those together. And we tend to look at the transformational end of that spectrum where it is a major cyclical sort of activity. So once they've transformed, they then have to be able to change, they have to do continuous improvement. But if they're continually transforming, they've got it wrong.
The way that organisations are now delivering, their digital experience or whatever that might be, that involves an awful lot more partners than they ever have before. So even the way that organisations are transforming, not all of them, but many of them, means that their transformation approach needs to consider not just their own operating model, but their operating model through the lens of their partners as well. And a client talking about, well, in their organisation, the expectation is that the workforce, the psychological contract with the workforce is now different. And it's, gone are the days where you would have a role and you would, be a kind of expert in that role. But that because that role is changing, you're expected to learn the whole time and etc. And I did ask the question, how do we make that happen when actually, certainly in my experience, the value that's placed on learning in an organisation could be higher. So this expectation that you would learn off the side of your desk. And so one of my questions around transformation for all of us is, what are the considerations that we need to lay at the organisation design stage? What are the considerations that we need to lay at the management teams of our clients so that they can consider the impact of what a digital transformation might look like.
Our approach where we have these sort of two super components, where of course you've got to have the structural and operational sort of element to transforming. So you've got to be able to transform the structure of the operating model and everything that holds. You've got to be able to sort of transform the organisation design to meet the things that you need to do, the capabilities that you need to deliver. I can remember sort of 15, 20 years ago, people talking about, how do you change the culture? In my experience, you don't change the culture, you evolve a culture from something to something else.
When you're trying to move an organisation from A to B, there are certain things that need to happen that are often whisked into a programmatic framework. And so for me, I'm very outcome focused when it comes to change, and I'm very driven by making sure that the accountability doesn't from the word go, I'm thinking, how can I shift that? How can I make sure that it's within the organisation, that people who are touched understand what's happening, how the world will change, and what needs to happen to support them. And so for me, those conversations, need to happen very early on. One of the principles that I'm very keen on in the transformation journey from a change perspective is the principle of equifinality. So working across multiple functions, going in a direction, being able to articulate where the place we're trying to get to, why we're needing to get there, why it's important, and for them knowing who's sponsoring, which is of another key point. But also to say, do you know what? How we get there, from your perspective, that's for you to design and for me to support. What's important is how can you get there? Here are the outcomes from a change perspective, making sure that people know what adjustments that they need to make. But it's up to that function, it's up to that part of the business to collaborate and work through what they need to do differently and get the support that they need from someone like us and the coaching and the like. So that works. That's worked so well, I think, for a lot of businesses, and I think it addresses the points that you're raising. The way you're asking me to do what in that way. Why? Yes. It's no, we're needing you to go here. This is why. Yes. What do you need to do to get there? How can we help you?
Which is why it's so important in the early stages, as we do with our clients, understand how well defined the change story is and how well understood it is across the organisation. But not to then, if it isn't well defined and not well understood, to lock yourself away in a room with a small bunch of people and create it. It's to go out and create it, co-create it with the whole organisation. Leadership led, obviously. You can't go out and say, I've got no idea what's the story. You need to give some frame to it, but actually you need to have the humility to know the answer lies 10 metres from the customer, not in head office somewhere.